Welcome back to the MMA Prospectus. For those of you who end up watching us live, we are recording this on Wednesday, December 2nd. For the rest of you, this will be up on the website Friday the 4th. I know it's a little weird, but we got a lot of video going up on Bloody Elbow, and we try to keep it all spaced out. Anyway, I'm joined this week by Tom Grant, as always, to talk about all the prospects on the upcoming big fight cards and the most recent big fight cards in UFC, Bellator, all that stuff. And we don't have a lot going on this week, Tom, but enough going on next week that we're going to jump ahead just a little.
Yeah, we're in a little bit of a lull. A little odd they didn't do this on Thanksgiving weekend, but
Yeah.
whatever. It's cool. Yeah, and then they've absolutely overloaded next week with a ton of prospects. This is like a whole week of young fighters.
I think the original plan, if I remember correctly, was actually to have an event this week, one of next week events, but there was a booking conflict with the arena or something.
Okay.
And so they ended up moving it to next week. And then once they'd moved it to next week and had two events back to back, they decided, well, why not make a third event and do the whole like Friday, Saturday, Sunday weekend?
The
And so they,
super event lead up thing. They've done this once
yeah,
before, 3 events in 1 week.
yeah, they've done stuff like it before. I don't know if they've ever done 3 in 3 days though, like
Yeah. And
one
of
after the other
course,
after the other.
keeping with a yearly tradition, the giant holiday party that me and my wife go to every year is, of course, right over 194. So I will not be watching it live.
Of
Um,
course.
yeah, but it's a fun. I have a great time at this party. Man, every year I miss a great event live, and I have to watch it. I have to watch it the day after.
Oh well. That so it goes, so it goes. We'll be talking about 194 next week. I think we'll look at the Van Zant Namajunas Fight Pass card and maybe dip into the McGregor Faber finale card this week. We might come back to McGregor Faber once they actually announce the finalists and we can watch a little tape on who we know is going to be fighting for the tough finale, but we don't know that this week. So,
And you and I both agree that when it comes to like actually assessing prospects, on the show of the Ultimate Fighter is one of the worst places to do it.
yeah, which is why I don't want to dip in early and like talk about, oh well, watching the show we can see these guys look really great and exciting. I want to know who the finalists are, then go back and watch tape of them pre-tough to figure out how they actually fight, because tough itself does not tell you a whole hell of a lot.
No, it's such a weird situation for fighters to be in that very good fighters can look very average on it.
The weird thing I find out of it, though, and this is the thing that is still a bit strange to me, considering how poorly it is at representing like actual fighter talent and how good guys are and all that, is that 9 times out of 10, the best fighter on the show tends to win it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of being the best fighter on the show is that you're adaptable. But
Yeah,
I think it's also the most finished fighter tends to win the show.
yeah, but they don't tend to look good winning it.
No,
Like getting there, you get a lot of guys where people are just like, ugh, this guy looks like crap. And then they actually do, or like I guess we could say, TJ Dillashaw was the best fighter to come off his season. He didn't win it in the finale. Um, but yeah, I don't think there was a lot of people like super hyped on TJ Dillashaw off tough.
yeah, I mean, like it's the same deal. Like Rashad Evans on his season of the Ultimate Fighter didn't really excite a lot of people.
Yep.
Um, so it's not. I don't think it's all that shocking when that happens because we've talked about a lot. The short preparation time it limits what you can prepare for, and the really good fighters, they especially the guys coming out of big camps, they're used to being able to prepare specific aspects of
Yeah.
their game, and when you are thrown into the situation where you don't know who you're fighting until it's 2 days before the fight, you just win it any way you can.
Yeah. So we'll get a little into that more next week. Not a lot because tough is never really worth focusing that much time on anymore. But first off, this week I want to start out just by talking about some of the fighters we saw show up uh, at the last event in Korea, and there were a few. And I think probably most notably would be Doo-Ho Choi. He had the biggest challenge in front of him, and he showed the most in getting the win.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like, I mean, I think Sam Cecilia was a hell of a tough fight to put in front of him. Honestly, like even if it matches up well for him, and even if I thought he was gonna win, that to me, I mean, I think that's comparable to like oh, what's his name? The who's the Brazilian bantamweight? Uh,
Oh,
Thomas Almeida. I think it's
yes.
equivalent to like Thomas Almeida getting Brad Pickett. You know,
Yeah,
maybe
I know. I think
but
knocking out Sam Cecilia as quickly as succinctly as Choi did is not an easy thing to do, and is
no.
like that's a big step for a young fighter.
Yeah, I mean the only person who's ever knocked Cecilia out otherwise to date is Hani Jason, and that was Cecilia's featherweight debut, and that was in the second round. You know, I think it was that was a much different fight. That wasn't just like Hani Jason dialing him up. If I can remember, I barely remember it, but if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think it was nearly the kind of minute and a half of dominance we saw out of Doo-Ho Choi.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with Choi next. Because I mean, it's one of those. He kind of had that like some people were kind of tabbing him as like the super talent coming in, and if I remember correctly, we were both kind of like, let's pump the brakes, let's see a bit more of his game. And I mean, thus far the results haven't changed, and Sam Cecilia is a significant step up from the level of talent he's been fighting his entire career. Um, it's going to be interesting to see what happens against a higher level of fighter when you can't get him out of there in under 2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing out of Choi to some extent, like, and I know he's not the same caliber of offensive fighter, frankly. Um, but I think he's got a bit of that Conor McGregor thing to him, where like you know he doesn't have the same extreme technical. He's never shown the extreme technical deftness that McGregor has shown at various points in his career, like he showed right before jumping to the UFC out of Cage Warriors, when he just put on like an absolute master class against I can't remember the guy's name now, but
We're talking about McGregor, right?
yeah, right before he
The
jumped.
Mitch. Oh no, right before he jumps to UFC. Yeah. I remember what you're talking about. I can't think of it. It was a really well regarded fighter.
Yeah, he looked great. It was like this one of those sweet knockouts where he just popped him with a combo and absolutely destroyed him. It was Ivan Buckinger, and
Yep.
then he came right in, did the same thing to Brimage, and did the same thing to Brandao and all that. And Choi is not he's not that technical level, but he does have those. He has those natural talents,
Mm-hmm.
especially the power and the mechanics for the power to generate that power. That means that a lot of people are going to kind of like they're going to focus a lot on the technical deficiencies of his game without and like totally under regard just how dangerous he can be even against better technical fighters
Yeah.
simply for having that kind of natural power.
And I think it's worth pointing out that at this point, you know, he's been fighting for a lot longer than you would suspect looking at
Yeah.
that 24 years old. So I think to an extent, like he can get better, but I don't know if we're going to see huge jumps in his skill set considering the point in the career he's at and kind of who he's training with. I think we would see a jump if he moved to a more established MMA camp. I think we could see some of that get cleaned up. But I think to a certain extent, he might be the fighter that he is at this point.
Yeah,
Uh,
I kind of think that he will probably see what we'll see with him is that he'll level out as like a 10 to 15 fighter, and he'll just stay there for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Maybe put together enough of a run, like to get one title shot at some point and fall right back down.
Yeah, I could see that happening, and like him not improve, like the idea that he'll keep improving, but it'll become in small increments, and he'll just refine his game. But I don't know if he's gonna like reinvent his game to fit the UFC better once he starts facing opposition that isn't playing right into his hands in the first couple minutes of the fight.
Right down to the injury problems, but with a power he never had. I could see him being, it's kind of like the same thing as Tarek Safadine, except that Safadine's all technique and no power, whereas Duho Choi is a little more like all power and some technique.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see it, that same kind of thing where like Safadine, he floats around right at the bottom of the top 10, and he's probably going to stay there. Like, I don't think he's getting worse, but he's not going and he's not rising either.
Yeah.
And that just, it'll be interesting. It'd be great to see if he could really just like make a huge technical jump in his game. That would be pretty thrilling. But yeah, out of the camp he's training at, and with the years he's already invested, it does feel like we're starting to see a pretty polished power puncher in the cage. So that was a great showing from him. Otherwise, the other big prospect that showed up to me, honestly, is Freddy Serrano.
Yeah, I wasn't able to watch the prelims of this one, though. I heard a great deal about them. I heard Serrano won. I heard Dominic Steele got a just massive slam knockout. And then because of the people I train with, I heard a lot about Marco Beltran's win because he actually trains out of my gym. So I've worked a little, not really worked with him. He and I trained on the same mat at the same time to be more accurate. Yeah, but
Beltran did. He did fine. He got a pretty solid win. It wasn't anything electrifying over Ning Guangyu, but
was it a takedown that injured the arm, or was it a kick?
That is for Serrano.
Yeah.
That was a takedown. That was the classic Shogun Coleman injury.
Just posted his arm?
Yep. Posted his arm, elbow bent totally the wrong way.
Yeah. I actually see that. Yeah, no, I saw the video of this. Yeah. Yeah, I can't blame a guy for posting his arm in that particular situation. You kind of pick between posting your arm and getting your shoulder dislocated. So you post your arm. Yeah, so that's a good one for Serrano. Dominic Steele, obviously, speaking of slams, I saw that one too. That was a massive slam.
Yeah, that was. Brutal. And, that was a great win for him in a fight. I mean, that's like Steele, you look at him, he's obviously huge, even at welterweight, super powerful. But, but that's still kind of like a come behind win in a fight he was kind of losing. Like,
yeah.
That was him applying that power in a way that he doesn't usually, frankly.
Yeah.
But that was a good win. The Serrano win, though, that's the one that I'm happy to see because Serrano seems like one of those guys. Like, he is a latecomer to MMA. He's 36, but we're starting to see as he gets more comfortable in his MMA career. I think we're going to see more of his wrestling come across. And he's a phenomenal athlete. Like, just a top shelf, powerful, fast fighter for flyweight. So I'm glad to see him just, even if it is an injury, like it was an injury that was very much caused by Serrano. Like,
yeah, that's not one of those like freak accidents in the cage. It was that is a takedown victory. Like that was a stoppage by takedown, basically.
So I'm excited. I hope to see Serrano continue improving. He's one of those guys that I could see him retire before he stops getting better,
Yeah.
Anyway, otherwise, Courtney Casey, I lost to Seo Hee Ham, which, that's nothing major to write home about there. And Dominic Waters lost to Dong Young Kim, also nothing to write home about. And yeah, not a lot of real like prospect showings otherwise on that card. Fun card, but not a lot of development. So turning to this week, there are two cards going on this week that have anything worth mentioning, and not a lot even at that point. One is this Bellator 147 card. Most notable person on it being a young fighter on it being Pablo Villaseca, who's fighting Josh Thompson in the main event. Um, Watching a little tape on Villaseca, he seems like a good athlete. He's a pretty diverse striking, like a diverse, well trained fighter, I would say. Like he's got a fun, exciting striking game. He's aggressive. He attacks well in transition. He's got a little bit of wrestling, all that. But just because he's hasn't trained anywhere major and he's fought on like really small circuits, or like South American regional scene, or I guess France as well. Fought in France, fought in Chile. His game's just like there are a lot of, I don't know. There's some parts missing where it's like it's a really exciting, aggressive game, but it's not a safe game at all.
Yeah, and I just get the feeling off of this match, like this is the kind of matchmaking um we saw for Josh Thompson, like back in the Strikeforce days, like in between getting like big legit opponents,
Yep.
get an Ash Bowman or an Adam Lynn or one
Yep.
of those like in Playboy Mansion fights
Yep.
for Strikeforce, and this very much to me smacks of that, where we're seeing Josh Thompson. Scott Coker is in the process of building Josh Thompson back up after Thompson leaving the UFC the way he did.
Yeah, and I mean it's classic Scott Coker style of fight building, and you know what? I mean, I'm fine with it, especially because I spoke to Josh last week about this coming in and all that, and everything he says he's talking about is very much like I'm focused on the end of my career. Like this is my last big run. I'm gonna get what I can out of it. So
I
Bellator's got him headlining. They've got him in a build-up fight against a guy who's gonna be aggressive and fun, but who Josh can outwork with position and technique.
Yeah,
Um, and then they'll line him up for either a title shot or just a couple of big name fights, and
I hmm, I have a question.
yeah,
So we have a very clear distinction between like the way Scott Coker makes fights and the way that the UFC has traditionally made fights. And Scott
yep,
Coker's is much more in line with like your traditional kickboxing, boxing way of making.
yep.
Which one is better for developing and maintaining a fighter?
Depends on it depends on the eye for talent, I think, honestly. I think if you have a really good eye for top MMA talent, Coker's model is better for developing fighters because you pick. I mean, the way it seems to work, at least as far as I can tell, is you pick guys out and you say, okay, this is one of our future stars. And then you book him in ways that show off his talents and are competitive, but they keep him moving forward and building, and that are very like select fights to get him over and to get him into big fights. And if he loses those big fights, then you go right back down to the building up and the in between fights that he can win. And then you get him another big fight and you bring him back down and all that. And I think if you're really good at picking out those fighters that are worth handling like that, especially the young fighters that are worth handling like that, then I think that's not a bad way to go. Like we've seen, with guys like Nick Diaz or Josh Thompson or Gilbert Melendez and others, um, that they end up being very well crafted stars. They end up being well crafted headline caliber fighters because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're out of guys that you might not otherwise, if you go the UFC route, the UFC route is always, what's the toughest possible fight between this fighter and somebody with similar experience? Like, that's always their angle.
Yeah.
And we see a ton of guys drop out of the UFC early who have promise, who have skill, who have ability, but they just get booked into tough fight after tough fight, and maybe their confidence isn't quite there. Maybe technically they're not quite there. You know, one thing or another, and it, you run through a lot of guys, and the UFC only then gets at the top like these super tough, super, you know, battled worn veterans, basically.
I think I think the UFC in past years has started adopting a bit more of softer touch with people they've identified. I think the first time
Yeah.
I really recognized it was John Jones,
Yeah.
because I remember like really like UFC 94 was the first time Jones really jumped out to me.
Hmm.
I didn't really catch on to him at 87. That was like right when I was starting to pay attention to MMA, and I wasn't really, paying that close of attention to the undercards. And 94, he jumped out, and it was like there was quite a bit of buzz about him then. But if you look at it, the UFC slow played him in a big way, and like very carefully kind of built him up over the course of like 5 fights, 6 fights,
Hmm.
before giving him that first like really high level opponent in Ryan Bader. Like Vladimir Matyashenko was like the top 10, the gatekeeper to the top 10 at that time,
Yeah.
and that was his sixth UFC fight. And the Matt Hamill loss, like they didn't really slow him down because of that,
No.
because
No.
it wasn't really a loss. Um, So I think the UFC has learned. We're seeing that more with like Paige Van Zant too.
Yeah.
They're very much.
I would say that like Jones was an anomaly when they did that with him,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say that the way, like, very specifically, the way they brought Conor McGregor forward was done with a clear eye of, how do we make this guy look like a legit contender, and in the right kind of action fights,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I think that's another example that I think is a prime one of this. Like, we have a guy that's talented. We have a guy that could be a star. How do we bring him along in competitive but showcasey fights?
Yeah, the Van Zant fight, the Van Zant bookings so far, like, I don't know. There's some of that, but I also think that they get like, I think that people are running like, I don't know, like, they seem to have like these runaway expectations that she should be overbooked almost.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she gets normal bookings, it's like, oh, well, that's really disappointing.
Yeah,
Like,
no, I think there is. I think there is a fair amount of overreaction to. I'm not saying she's getting an easy path. I'm saying that they have clearly marked her out as a star and
yeah,
are carefully making her matches to make sure that while they're competitive, there's still fights that like play towards what she does well. Also,
yeah. I mean, I would
her
especially say that.
upcoming fight being a notable exception.
Yeah, I would say that especially of the Chambers fight, but I mean, even the Herrig fight, Herrig's a lot better fighter than people give her credit for.
Yes, no, I agree.
So
Um,
I think there's, but I mean, the big one, Sage Northcutt, we're definitely seeing that same, like, the UFC has brought him in, and he's facing the lowest caliber lightweights the UFC has on the roster.
yes, and I think there is value to the way. I think there's value to the way the UFC does it. I like the way when the UFC decides something.
I've couple fights in 2006, one in 2007. Then he went to the UFC, and so it's hard to know, like, when a guy's coming in off that kind of thing, like how much actual training he does if he's not fighting very often.
Mm-hmm.
And did well on Tough, looked great, was a great athlete, but just, and even to this date, just kind of seems like he has some parts missing to his game.
Yeah.
Even like that Yui Nam fight, like he started strong, but as he like the moment his takedown game stopped working, his game just kind of fell apart.
Yeah. I think people also probably want us to mention that Sage Northcutt guy on this card.
Oh yeah, no, he's an interesting prospect. Certainly, that good old Sage Northcutt.
Yeah, I'm not. I think the one thing that we really need to, as the hyperbole continues to build behind Sage Northcutt, I think we need to just remind people that he is a really good prospect. He is a
Oh yeah,
fantastic physical specimen. He's still very raw.
yep.
He's most likely going to lose a fight or two along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I actually really like this matchup against Pfister
Mhm.
because Pfister is really technically ugly, sloppy as hell. Not the best, not a very good athlete, frankly, at all.
Yeah.
Pretty underwhelming athlete, but he is aggressive as shit, and he's tough, and he is a wrestle grappling clinger. So he's the kind of fighter that is going to almost certainly bum rush Sage Northcutt with wild strikes, try to take him down desperately, and search for his back at the first opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's a good fight for somebody like Sage Northcutt right now. I mean, that's an interesting test because it's, Pfister, like, this is still the lowest level of UFC lightweight they can offer,
Hmm.
but it isn't a fight that is undangerous for Northcutt. If he gasses and he can't knock Pfister out early,
Yeah.
Pfister could easily beat him.
Nope. I agree. I think this is a dangerous fight for Northcutt in some ways, and it's going to be on. I think it's on Fight Pass for a reason,
Yep.
because they want to test him out without exposing him, without taking too much of the shine off of him. Because if the UFC is getting behind him, it's kind of assured that a lot of hardcore, there's going to be a pushback in the hardcore
Oh
community.
yeah.
That's so they want to get his growing pains out of the way, out of the sight of the public.
Very much. Still, I'm excited about Sage Northcutt. He's
Yep.
a top shelf athlete. He's got a really fun background that, I mean, as we've talked about before, when you talk about like the MMA native
Mm-hmm.
and how there will always be a place for for like skill players in MMA, he's got the kind of background that very, very, very few fighters are going to be able to replicate. And that means that he's always going to have a part of his game that is going to be hard for other fighters to train for.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
that's
I
great.
agree.
Like you look at a lot of the best fighters and a lot of them have that. They have something that they do and that just makes them hard to work around.
Yeah. Who else we got going on?
Elias
Theodore.
Theodoru, yeah.
Yep. Yep. He's a fun one.
A tough winner, as we talked about. Oftentimes, even though we don't like the Ultimate Fighter and don't think it's a very good judge of talent, oftentimes the best fighters do tend to win out on there, and he is certainly the best fighter to come off his season of Tough. And he, he seems like a really legit middleweight.
Yep. Seems like a legit middleweight, good athlete, good offensive tools, A+ Twitter game, as we were discussing before the show.
Definitely.
I think he could be definitely a tough fighter that gets some love, like in the sense of becoming like something of a celebrity within the sport. Not necessarily outside of the sport, but like within the sport of MMA, it could definitely become a name that people are quite familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily see him being kind of a cult fighter, or like a fan favorite fighter. Um, and he's just like he's got. I don't know. It's hard to overemphasize this, but having the right like size and toughness for the bigger divisions, especially, is
Mhm.
so important. And we're looking at middleweights, and we're looking at guys who are coming up in the middleweight division. So often, you're just looking at these guys who look really undersized or underpowered, who might have some nice technical skills, but they just don't they don't shine out as being great athletes, and he seems like he's just a really super powerful athlete in the division. He's built like a brick shithouse.
Yeah, yeah. And then this card, one of the nice things about Fight Pass cards is we have two legit prospects in the main event.
Yeah.
And I think the short notice really hurt Van Zandt on this. I think Rose Namajunas is a bad matchup for her. I think it's still winnable for Van Zandt in a couple ways, but I think Namajunas has some real paths to victory in this fight that I don't know if Van Zandt has a great answer for yet.
It's a great fight, and it's a fight I like a lot because, I mean, I don't think, like I said, I don't actually think there's too much shine on Van Zandt in term. Like, I don't think she's overhyped. I don't think she's been underbooked. I think that a lot of the complaints around her are worthless, frankly.
I would agree with that.
Like, she's not overly ranked. Like, she's ranked like 7 or 8 or something. I don't think she's like skyrocketed unfairly up the division. But this is a fight that will take some shine off one of these fighters. And it is a fight that I think Namajunas can win. She's got, because Van Zandt's not a like power finisher. She's not the kind of fighter that's just going to come out and knock you out or instantly submit you. She's a slow breakdown grinder. Lots of clinch fighting, lots of top position grinding, lots of short shots. All cardio, all grinding, all power. That's kind of her style. And Namajunas, if she gives Namajunas a lot of chances and doesn't have the kind of technical wrestling game that a lot of the other, or that Carla Esparza had, or the much more competent outside striking game of Tisha Torres, I can see Namajunas, her standing back take game, her ability to just jump in and out of range, to really be a dynamic fighter.
And find things even in mere moments on the mat. I think all that adds up to problems for Paige Van Zandt. That's gonna make it a fun fight.
Yeah, and on the other side, I mean, Van Zandt could just muscle Namajunas around for 3 rounds or for 5 rounds and just outwork her.
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate possibility.
Because Van Zandt is a rare athlete at women's strawweight. She's a big, powerful, really just like really great athlete. Really underrated for just how strong she seems to be.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Like, that's what we really saw in like her fight against Felice Herrig. Was that Herrig was the more technical fighter in pretty much every area, but over the course of the fight, it was just like Van Zandt would just outmuscle her everywhere.
Yeah, but I think it's a great fight on top of a really good card of young fighters. Although the later in the week we don't really. I mean, so the tough card, there's a couple youngish fighters, but I mean the cherry on top of what would have been an awesome prospect meet of Mirsad Bektic fighting obviously got called off, which is a huge bummer.
We took a little time to look at Jason Knight before we did the show. I don't think he's going to beat Tatsuya Kawajiri.
No. I mean, very much doesn't wrestle very well. Very much a play for submissions from guard kind of guy from what we saw.
Yeah, and an aggressive, like a decent striker when he has a clear advantage, but not a like overpowering, overwhelming striker.
Yeah, and when he was back, he pretty much just rinse and repeats the basic rubber guard sequence of like setting up the rubber guard and then going for the omoplata or the triangle. And I mean, in his last fight, or not his last fight, but I don't know. Oh yeah, it was his last fight. Like a fight against a pretty legit athlete and wrestler. He pretty much just rinsed and repeated that sequence 10, 11 times before he actually got the triangle. And I don't think that's going to play against Kawajiri, who's actually going to look to stuff your leg down and pass the half guard as opposed to I'm forgetting the Who
Musa
was it?
Hamanaev.
Yeah, and like one of my big criticisms of the Russians generally in MMA is that they don't pass guard. They are very content to hang out in the closed guard. And you can win there, but you spend a lot of time giving your opponents chances at offense as opposed to just moving to the half guard and shutting down like 90% of the offensive submissions they can have.
Well, in general, a lot of the Russian fighters, like, they're great wrestlers and they're great scramblers and they work hard for submissions, but they tend to be aggressive to a fault at times in like how they approach grappling, where they don't have a lot of respect for like defensive grappling and like, oh, I need to
Yeah.
actually be sure I stay safe in positions. It's very much like, I'm in this position, I'm going to stay in it now, and I'm going to try to work for the most aggressive offense I can come up with.
Yeah. And then, oh, he's doing something with his legs, shake that off. Oh, he's doing something with his legs again, shake that off. Oh, I'm in a triangle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that win for Knight over Hamanaev, like, he got dialed up in the first round, and especially when I'm looking at prospects, I tend to look at their first rounds, and that's how I define the fighter. Is like, how are you when you're coming out of the gate? Because when you're in the UFC, you don't get a lot of chances to like turn momentum. You know, if you're
Yeah.
a second, third round fighter, unless you're an amazing, like, unless you just start really slow and then get amazing as the fight goes on, you're not going to get a lot of chances to be a late round winner in the UFC.
Speaking of amazing, as the fight goes on, Konstantin Arokin is fighting on this card.
I'm still hyped. I don't even give a shit. I'm glad they booked him with Gabriel Gonzaga, who is no cardio machine himself.
Yeah.
And
I think there's a high probability that he looks much better in this fight, and that all the crap that you got, as hysterical as it was, is, I think there's a fair chance he looks fairly good in this fight.
yeah, I'm still holding out in my heart of hearts. I'm holding out the hope that he can go a little bit of the Tumanov route, where Tumanov got lost to Ildemar Alcantara, the lesser Alcantara brother in his debut, who was just
Yeah.
bigger and tougher and just drug him down and wore him out, much like Irakin losing to Victor Pesta. And then Tumanov turned it around, figured his shit out, got it together, and looked awesome. So,
Victor Pesca.
Irakin still has absolutely devastating one-punch KO power.
Yep. He's been fighting for, what, 3 years at this point, and it's heavyweight, so he's got another 20,
Yeah.
17 years of high-level fighting in front of him. So
yeah, I have hopes. I'm not, I realize he got derailed. I realized I hyped him. I was big on him, and I got to sit there and eat that crow. But I'm still excited.
yeah, I'm with you. I'm looking forward to that fight, because I'm actually going to be able to sit down and watch this card on Friday, like, live. It's going to be the only card this week I'll be able to watch live.
Otherwise, Justin Scoggins, Joby Sanchez. This is one of those UFC bookings that, like, one of these guys could be out of the promotion without, in a hurry, and it'll be kind of weird because they're both very good prospects. Joby Sanchez training out of Jackson Wink, good athlete, solid fundamentals.
Looked great earlier this year.
Yeah.
In his first fight. I mean, like, it was a split decision, but I remember people coming away being pretty impressed with him.
Yeah. And then Tateki Matsuda, we've talked about, he's one of those East Coast vets who's just like, they're all tough as nails everywhere.
Yeah.
So that being a split, that being a tougher win than people thought. And then Scoggins, he came in as this really impressive, interesting karateka kind of kickboxer. He's in John Moraga. So he lost those, beat Josh Sampo last time out. And now he and Sanchez are facing off together, and one of them is going to walk out with a loss. And it's kind of sad because, Scoggins is only 3 years into his career. Sanchez is only 4 years into his. And I don't know, flyweight they need to keep guys like this developing, because they could very easily be top 10 fighters down the line.
Yeah, I agree.
So
All right.
Unfortunately, one of them's going to get a setback.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, I'm going to say we should wrap up the show. We got more stuff to talk about for next week, but I got shit I got to do. So
Yeah, me too. So as I say, yeah. I'm actually gonna be writing some for Bloody Elbow next week. I'm excited for it.
Awesome.
Doing a little
I'm
piece
excited
on
to read it.
Chris Weidman's top game and a little bit about Luke Rockhold's top game. How they're similar yet different.
Very fun. I look forward to it.
I should know how to pump a piece.
There you go. Everybody should look forward to it. Read it. Like this video because you have to. That's the only way that all of my self-worth is wrapped up in the thumbs up thing under the YouTube.
Do it for Zane.
Do it for me.
Hashtag
and
for Zane.
subscribe to MMANation.com. That's DOTCOM to get all the rest of our interviews, our highlights, our analysis, all our other video work that we do. We'll be back with I'll be doing a vivisection tomorrow for the Bellator card. We'll have Knuckle Up and all that other stuff. Probably another random show this week, and then a ton of shows. I don't even know how we're going to do it for next week. Everything will be devoted to the UFC, so you can expect a ton of content for that. And until then, we'll be back with another prospectus as well, so tune in for that. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks for watching. You can find me on Twitter at TheSameTime. You can find Tom on Twitter at TP_Grant. And we will see you all next time.